Hi, and welcome to episode 23 of the ChessTDD series. I just looked tonight and saw that it's been about a month since I posted that, so for that I apologize. Or I should say, since I posted the last episode. I am burning the midnight oil a bit here in recording this. I actually did the visual part of this a couple days ago, so I'm going to try to remember what I did as we go and narrate it. This is a little bit different than what you're used to, so I'll probably be a little more narrative in format. What I did was, after some back and forth as to whether I should install a tool for acceptance testing or not, I decided to. I had never used SpecFlow before. I had been watching a little bit of Pluralsight video about it and decided to give it a try. I was kind of thinking maybe I shouldn't put you through watching me flounder around with a tool, but what the heck, it's experimental. So to actually narrate what's going on here, I just did in the extensions dialog for Visual Studio, it went and searched online for SpecFlow. It came right up for VS 2013. I installed it. It then wanted to restart the IDE, which I'm doing. And here you see this helpful introductory screen to SpecFlow. You can see that it says, okay, now go ahead and create a project, install a NuGet package. True to form, in line with the post I wrote a little while ago about not abiding by RTFM. I didn't really read this. I just kind of started doing stuff. Full disclosure, I had seen at least some of this done a week ago or so on Pluralsight, so I wasn't just, prophetic about how to do all this. I kind of remembered it. So I did a search for a NuGet package for SpecFlow. So first you've got to install it as a plugin to the IDE, I guess, and secondly you have to install the actual NuGet package. So I installed the package for the solution. And then I realized, I don't really want to add it to any of these. I want to create another project. So I wanted to see if I could just add it to the solution. Apparently not. So I backed out and I said, all right, let's create a solution here. So I am creating a solution that I'll call something like chess.acceptance tests. Philosophically, what I've done here so far is write a lot of unit tests. Could call this inside-out test-driven development. People will swear by that, and other people will swear by ATDD, acceptance test-driven development, or outside-in test-driven development. I'm sort of a strange person in that I just kind of vacillate between both as the mood strikes me or the project strikes me. Here, I didn't have end users. I'm just kind of developing this in a vacuum for things that I'm just kind of like fleshing out and teasing out and going to perhaps throw up on some kind of public source control for other people where I don't really have clear stakeholders when I start. I'll usually do a lot of unit testing first. If I have clearly defined acceptance criteria going in, then I will absolutely write tests for those and do an outside-in approach. So that's kind of explaining myself and what I'm doing here and why it's only at this point I've gotten to acceptance tests. So I installed the NuGet package after all, once I got this acceptance test project in place. And the next challenge I'm going to have here is I'm not using NUnit, so there's this configuration. If I go to the I think it's the app config, yeah. In here they had a section for SpecFlow, and that dip I think you just saw as I went to refer to a browser in another window to get this tag that you have to add in here to specify that you want to use the MS Test framework, assuming you want to use MS Test framework and you're following along. If you prefer NUnit or some other test running framework, I'm sure you can find a number of providers that go along with SpecFlow. So the other thing I should mention, in case you didn't catch it while I was talking, the kind of test that project that I created for this chess.acceptance is a unit test project. So you just make like you're creating a garden variety unit test project, and then you add in this SpecFlow NuGet package. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say that this feature is going to be pawn moves. And I am not idiomatic at all with SpecFlow. I've never used it before. So I'm just taking kind of a wild stab at what should be in this file. And I think off the top, this will wind up being something like pawn moves from game start or something, or pawn moves for player one from game start. I don't know. Right now, I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around this as I go and translate what I see here as their template example into what I am actually going to do in my own domain. So given that I have a normal chessboard initial setup and I am the first player, when I look for moves for, let's say, the rook on the left's pawn, I should see a move that's the next square forward is what I'm trying to express here. And you'll see a bit of me floundering with SpecFlow itself because I don't know what I'm doing. I know enough to know that this 1, 2 is probably telling SpecFlow that I'm going to supply some kind of argument, but I figure I'll sort all that out in a minute. And as memory serves, that's exactly what happened. So I'm going to have to kind of get used to this format and how this is implemented around. I believe the pattern here is called Gherkin. I believe this given and, or given when then, this way of describing. There's sort of a standard language around it. It's actually pretty nice in general for describing not just acceptance test scenarios in an automated sense, but like if you're writing user stories or just fleshing out acceptance criteria on the back of a card, whatever the case may be, it's nice to be sort of precise that way because all stakeholders involved can agree on it. You can bring over somebody if you have separate QA. It's easy written in this language for both programmers and even people like business analysts or external stakeholders, people maintaining the application, whoever can understand this. So it's a nice point for bringing the business together with the implementation. And roughly what SpecFlow does is that you have this text file, and behind the scenes, it's going to parse the text file with your keywords. And then it's going to do a late binding of sorts to generate methods behind the scenes. So this text in the text file gets tied to actual methods that then get executed by the test runner. One of the features of the Studio plugin here is you can see that things are turning purple and black. It turns black when the bit of text is properly paired with one of those methods, and then it's purple when it's orphaned. So if you're looking at this right now, I have 2 black lines and 2 purple lines. So for the first 2, I have methods tied in. Now I've messed it up from the generation I did with the last 2 lines because I'm changing the descriptions. So there may be a ton of better ways to do this, but once you get this kind of in place, you can go and regenerate. Yeah, and I think I had a little bit of trouble with this if memory serves. So I'm going to say generate step definitions. And now I'm not really entirely sure why, but it only wanted to generate one of them. I don't know. My apologies. This is not a flaw of the tool. It's a flaw of me. So I seem to have blown away. I think it wanted to generate a second file, and I misunderstood it and overwrote my first file. So when I go back, now I've got 3 purple and 1 black. So I'm not making progress this time, and it was popping up on my second monitor. I want to generate. I'm not sure if this is better. Maybe it's just adding them. I've only got 3 of the 4 here now, so I think at this point I got frustrated and deleted the file, and then everything was good. But you can kind of see the scheme going on there. So in that attribute on top of the method, you can see a matching happening with the text in this file. From what I recall of the Pluralsight course that I was watching on this, there we go, now I'll get all of them. From what I recall of that Pluralsight course that I was watching, you can enable sort of different binding schemes. Like I think you can have, instead of an attribute with the actual string text in it, you can have the method instead take the text name, but with underscores, snake casing, or whatever you want to call that. If anybody knows, or if I can find something that makes it not generate these files with the formatting all jacked up, I'd be interested in hearing about that. I didn't do the necessary bit of yak shaving to figure that out quite. I figured I'd kind of diverted from the whole test-driven development approach of this series enough, because at the moment I'm not really test driving anything. I'm fleshing out a whole series of acceptance tests for functionality that I believe I have mostly in place. Once I kind of get a set of sane acceptance tests going here, I might look for shortcomings through the acceptance tests. And the reason I say that is it's been a while since I did a lot with the code base, but I think that we're maybe getting to the point now where it's actually easier to drive out system shortcomings with real world scenarios, where I might have to go sort of picking through the code and manufacturing things to figure out what's not working on a more micro scale. Because there's a lot of functionality that's been implemented so far in the code. So I think, like some of this stuff like en passant and castling, some of the more advanced stuff might be reasonable to do an ATDD approach with. So anyway, what I'm doing now is a bit of technical debt accruing. Now that I've actually gotten to the point where where NCrunch is running these acceptance tests, now I need to actually write them. So what I want to do is make my given not be a lie. So I don't want to rewrite this logic for setting up the board. So for the short term, I'm going to invoke these test classes and their static methods. It's kind of icky, and since I'm invoking this in the acceptance test project and in the unit test project, it's starting to tell me that maybe I want to go with an actual first-class solution in the production code, some kind of like standard board populator or something, some kind of like informal decorator, but not with inheritance. I don't know, something that essentially takes a board and spits out a populated board. I think in general that construct could be used looking way down the line, and I wouldn't gold plate like this, but you could kind of have a mind towards maybe if you were really going to expand this out, you'd have different classes or implementations that would decorate different boards. Maybe you have one to set up the board, but maybe you have one to recreate, I don't know, certain classic chess games. So this is a hack in the interim. I'm going to throw a card on the Trello board here at the end for it. But my goal in this episode, as the time is worn on, is really just to get like one acceptance test passing, kind of prove out this concept, and then I think that life will be generally good at that point where it'll get easier to write more and more of these acceptance tests. I might do you a bit of a favor and practice a little on something else before I come back at it, just so there's not so much floundering. I thought maybe the floundering would have a good bit of value for anyone out there that's never used SpecFlow, or at least if you're not real familiar with it, and seeing how it gets set up. So hopefully there's some value there. So now the problem here is that I don't believe this method oh, it is public and it's static. Oh, it's not compiling because I'm referring to a class level field. So I have to follow suit with what, excuse me, with what I did with the set up standard pieces method. Go back to make this public static and then make target an argument that gets passed in. Then we'll have to go figure out what's breaking. So, yeah, all of this is icky. There's no getting around that. I'm taking on this technical debt for the purpose of getting going with SpecFlow. I've done enough of this test-driven approach over the years that I get pretty comfortable with taking on technical debt when I know the end is in sight. Like, if this were my day job, I would think that by the end of the day, I would have this cleaned up pretty nicely. I may do this in the next episode or two for this because I really don't like that. But, that's kind of something that's up to the individual too, like how much tech debt you're willing to take on. It's not one of those things where I'll be kind of squishy with it and say there is no right or wrong answer. I have an opinion on that. I am in favor of sort of putting in the extra mileage not to have TechDead in the code base. So as you're doing sort of frequent check-ins throughout the day, maybe you check in a bit of TechDead, but I'd like to personally leave things kind of clean as people come. And in fact, I prefer to follow the Boy Scout rule and try to actually leave things cleaner than they were when I started. Again, if I'm doing this publicly, I'm sure you'll find instances where I'm making a liar of myself, but that's the general approach. Speaking of tech debt, I don't really know the idiomatic way to approach what I'm doing here with these scenarios. So in the given, I'm creating a chessboard and populating it with pieces, and then I'm adding it to this scenario context. And that is the way to retain state between these different building blocks for your given, when, then scenarios. So in the given, I want to set something up, and then later I might set something up in the given I am the first player. That doesn't really require anything at the moment. But now when I look for moves available from pawn, so what this thing should do is actually get the moves in question. Now I have to go and query this scenario context, which appears to be some kind of non-specific object-based key value store. So I have to do this nasty casting. I'm hoping, and if anybody knows, feel free to chime in the comments. I'm hoping that I can find a better way to do this. I don't know if there's a strongly typed one, but there's got to be something, because this is kind of icky. And I go later and put a card in Trello for this too. But I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to try to get to not just green, but meaningful green. So I have gotten the moves, and then I've added the moves to the scenario context as well. So here in the then part, this is where I want to make my assertions according to this Gherkin format. So I have to do another one of these casts, and I'm going to get the moves out of the context, and then I'm going to assert, just like I have in the unit tests, that this collection of moves has the one I'm looking for. You have another option in C# land. I'm a little rusty. I've been doing a lot of Java over the last few months, but you can either do this hard cast or there's this as cast. Unless I'm, in this case, I want this to fail fast. So like this hard cast will throw an exception if you try to cast something that's not a board or an enumerable of board coordinate. This will actually toss an exception. If you do the as cast, then the thing you're getting moves would just come back as null. And then you get some kind of null reference exception here or something in moves.any. That's kind of opaque. So if the cast were failing, I'd kind of rather see a like invalid cast exception than some null reference exception. So that's why I'm doing that. Again, hopefully that'll all become academic, because I got to think there's a better way to do this. But the important thing here is that now we're green for a meaningful test. But I'm going to do, if memory serves, one thing here that might strike you as curious after I suppress this warning. I'm going to go try to make this turn red. I think I go and change this to like 1-5 or something. I'm not satisfied. Like, this test was green for a while. Okay, now I feel better that it's red. So if I'm trying to go to 1-5, that shouldn't be allowed, but I'm trying to go to 1-3 and that should. So I see that red and green. That's something that I'll do from time to time, especially when you've been green for a while and you're adjusting your tests. So if you're green and then you're green and then you're green and then you decide that you're done and you're still green, do you really know that you've done the right thing? Like I could delete the whole body of then the result contains a space one ahead and it would still be green. So I just want to make sure that I'm testing something meaningful. And now I feel good about that. So I am running low on time for this. So I started to square the board a little and then check things in. I have those cards for, I'm going to add the cards for fix nasty casting, as I mentioned, and then you're going to see another one up here for the, oh, I can't remember what I'm talking about. Oh, for that unpleasantness with the static methods for setup. And I'm going to call it a day on that one. Hopefully I'll get a little more proficient with SpecFlow. I certainly won't subject you to me kind of like floundering around and researching how to use that. So what you might get from me next time is I'll have done some of the research to figure out, like, is there a better idiom for what I'm doing, etc. And then you'll probably just see me introduce that with some explanation as I go. So hopefully this is helpful for those of you that have asked about, how do I do acceptance tests or end-to-end tests? This is a start. It obviously doesn't show you more complex things like how do you do this with a database or file IO or web services or something, but maybe we can find a way to grow into those topics later. Maybe it's another problem domain or something. There's not really much of that to be had here, and it would be sort of weird to manufacture it. So I'm kind of guessing here at what ought to be committed on up to GitHub. I feel bad. At some point I'll go through and pull this down on another machine to make sure I'm checking everything in that should be checked in, but it's late and I'm a little tired. So I'm going to do my commit. I'm going to sync it up to the master. You can take a look and give me feedback if you want. And with that, I will wish you a good night and until next time. So thanks for watching.